Hey, welcome to Let's Unravel. I'm your friend Christina, and I just wanted to say thank you so much to everybody that has been following along on YouTube, Apple Podcast, or Spotify. It's been so exciting to just watch the growth of this podcast. I mean, we're only on episode 3. We have so much good going on and heading towards a brighter future. And for any of you that might be first-time listeners, when you find a nugget in the show that you find useful, helpful, whatever you want to call it, please feel free to drop a comment below or feel free to give us a follow anywhere or on any platform that you listen to. So what's really exciting about this show is we love to talk about wins of the week. And so the win of the week this week actually has to do with our podcasting adventure here. And so Let's Unravel. This is a podcast show that I have built from scratch. I mean, I didn't know anything about podcasting when I started this show 3 weeks ago. And so one of the exciting things about creating the podcast show is learning different editing platforms, software, you name it. One of the platforms that I actually had to learn a little bit from is Premiere Pro. So the win of the week this week has to do with Premiere Pro. When I recorded episode 2, Humble Beginnings, I had noticed that the video component had been quite a bit overexposed. For anybody that doesn't know overexposed, basically there was a lot of light in the video. And so I had to learn on Premiere Pro, and the only way I knew how to learn from Premiere Pro was by first looking up a YouTube video. And I actually was able to fix the overexposure. So I was able to find a way to bring down some of the lighting. And honestly, I was quite proud of myself. So the win of the week for this week is honestly Premiere Pro for the win. And one of the exciting things about win of the week is I want to hear your wins of the week, whether it's getting a free drink at Starbucks, maybe it's honestly, it could be anything that's a win of the week. So whatever it is, drop it into the comments below. I'd love to hear more about how you guys are winning in each week. And so one of the exciting things about the episodes that we released last week, which was episode 2, Humble Beginnings, is if you had listened to Humble Beginnings, I had briefly mentioned this idea of character building moments. And what I decided to name this week's episode, which is going to be the topic, is called Refinement of Character. Refinement of Character feels like kind of like you took a big bite in a sandwich and you bit off more than you could kind of chew. That's kind of the way I feel like I look at refinement of character. But what's kind of exciting is when I go to create any of these shows, one of my favorite things, something that you'll learn about me, is I love words. And I'm always on the quest for finding the perfect word, because the beautiful thing about words is sometimes you find one word and it can embody more than just a phrase or more than really what the definition in itself means. It can embody really this whole feeling, this whole emotion. And I believe a lot of people in the world feel the same way. They just don't necessarily know how to find those words. That's why a lot of times they resonate with certain like musical artists like Taylor Swift, because what she's done is she's so intentional with the words that she picks that when she goes to build this story, she encapsulates a whole feeling. And the beauty of her songwriting always goes back to like that diary-like entry. And so the beauty of what I'm trying to do here at Let's Unravel is be intentional with our words and intentional in how we're building out episodes and the titles of them. So for example of this week, Refinement of Character, it feels like a lot. It could almost kind of even feel like a riddle at times, or at least that's how I feel about it. But the beautiful thing is if we put it in comparison and do a little bit of a compare and contrast with Humble Beginnings and Refinement of Character. So Humble Beginnings, which was episode 2 from last week. And if you haven't listened to it, I encourage you to go listen to that after you're done listening here. Humble Beginnings typically is something that's seen or witnessed by others, while Refinement of Character, or how I referred to in episode 2, character building moments, is really this soul or internal process. It's more of a you against yourself or introspective, like those moments where it's not something someone can take from you because it's a refinement of character moment. And when I was thinking about refinement of character and I was thinking about just character as a whole, it always felt like something that was often talked about in like 90s sitcoms. The whole episode is all about how this individual is building towards overcoming whatever it is that they need to overcome. And then there's this moment at the end of the show where they're talking to the parent, and it's very clearly obvious that they're having this like character building, this refinement of character moment. And it really propels them into the next episode, into another season, and that's really what it's all about. Though what I find interesting is in the society I grew up in, is I would say character felt like a fleeting feeling. And the reason why was it felt like it was a self-righteous, outdated tradition. Like, who needed character when you had results on your side? I mean, I came across this idea in so many places, and it was often amplified in moments where money was involved. And if it wasn't about money, it was about being perfect. And if it wasn't about being perfect, it was about being aesthetically pleasing. And I think it was interesting when I was growing up that this idea of everything looking perfect was the root of things. But it was also interesting because when I was a sophomore in high school, this is when Instagram rolled out, or when it was really at its peak of popularity. And it became this cultural obsession. Life didn't happen if you didn't post about it. And I remember that being a saying that we would say in the hallway. It didn't happen if you didn't post about it. And what was also interesting is in this time frame, filters. Filters became a lifeline. Filters became everything. The funniest thing about filters is they were everywhere and they were on everything. Though it was the people that obtained the right aesthetic that really cracked this code of everybody wanted to follow, everyone wanted to mimic. It was as if you could have been a celebrity or you could have been really this internet personality. But if you had cracked that code, if you had made things look just so, it was like you had it. You knew what you were doing. So, how does all of this correlate to character? Well, one of the things I've noticed is with filters. When filters first came out, it was this very unique experience. Filters were one of two things. They could either hide your insecurities or it could be something that was fun. I mean, a lot of times I always think about like with Snapchat when I was in high school, there was that puppy dog filter. And it was kind of this like funny idea and different things like that. It wasn't really the concept of a filter wasn't necessarily like, let me hide all my flaws, whereas that's what filters eventually became. And then it was so interesting because once that's what filters became, people all of a sudden started to do like no makeup Mondays. And what's so interesting is when we start to boil this down and we realize filters was just a way of trying to hide our imperfections or our insecurities. But the thing that's unique about character is character will amplify whatever our imperfections are or whatever our insecurities are. But what's also interesting is when you have these refinement of character moments, they can remove the shame of your insecurities. And that is the point of refinement of character. Now, I feel like I've talked in riddles, so let's really break this down. One of the things I want to be known for is being able to talk about hard topics, but also make it in a way where it feels like we're talking on the same playing field. And so let's talk about refinement of character and let's really identify or define what those terms mean. So refinement. Refinement literally means remove impurities from a substance. And when we look at the word character, character means mental and moral qualities distinctive to an individual. And so let's be really intentional about what those two words are. And so by having those definitions, now we know exactly what we're addressing in this situation. And one of my favorite things about even the word character is whenever you get into watching a TV show, and there's nothing I love more than seeing people's opinions on TV shows, especially like I'm currently watching the show Smallville. I love seeing people's comments about those characters. I think it's awesome. And I love when you look at shows like in particular, like Gilmore Girls, and when people get so passionate about those characters. My favorite is when people will talk about Rory and they'll be like, it was so out of character for Rory to do X, Y, and Z. And I think that's something that's so interesting is as people, we pick up on patterns. This is something that actually as humans, we're really good at. And character is, believe it or not, it is a pattern because character is about really upholding what you say you're going to do, regardless if it's in front of people or if it's behind closed doors. And so with character is really all about doing what you say you're going to do. So whether that's in crowded places, whether that's by yourself, it's really about upholding your word. Now, something that we do need to address, and I think this is going to be a hot take, character and manners are not the same thing. They're drastically different. And what is funny is probably a couple years ago, I would have thought character and manners were one and the same. I would have thought, what are you talking about? Like I wouldn't have even given it thought. But now with getting older and actually seeing, I can see how these two things are drastically different from each other. So manners, the way I would define manners is it's subject to change based on culture and rely on being exchanged between others. So, AKA how you act in front of other people. So if you happen to be walking into a building first, maybe you hold the door for the person. Maybe you're sitting down to eat dinner and you don't start eating until everybody gets their plate. those are like manners. Those are nice things. Those things don't define your character by any means. It leaves a good taste of who you are as a person to those other people, or makes people think more highly of you, but it doesn't really define your character. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're trustworthy. It just means that, well, you were brought up right. And so, what's also interesting is when we look at character, character is based on how you act, regardless of if others are watching. And that's the unique thing about character. Character is saying basically, whatever you say you're going to do, you fulfill what you're going to do. And the other thing about character, too, is there's this honesty component to it, where even like, perfect example, you say you're going to read a book in a month. Maybe you don't read that book in a month, but then someone's asking you out of like a accountability or more of a completion, and it's looking for like an honor code answer. And it's one of those things, did you read the book? And a lot of times when people know that you're not going to check up on something, it's easy to be like, yeah, I read it. Like I read most of it. I get it. But the point is like that character component is if you're like, well, no, I didn't finish it. And it's sort of like with character, to obtain and to hold character, it does require something. There is a cost to it. But I think there's this really great saying, anything worth having, there's a cost to it. And so now seeing how character and manners, those are two very different things. Two very different things. And the unique thing about manners is manners a lot of times will open doors for you, where if you are growing up in a society that lacks manners, it'll get the door open for you. But what's really unique is character will keep you in that room longer. And the thing is, character will provide you with this ability that people will trust you and they'll want you to be around. So now that we've talked about character, and now that we've talked about manners and even defined refinement of character, what I want to jump into next is there's been two moments in my life where there's been this refinement of character, and it's made really this lasting impression on who I am today. And so in this first instance, I was 17 years old and I bought my very first car. It was and I'm going to paint you a picture here. It was a 1997 blue Honda Accord, and I gave her the name of Betsy. And the funniest thing is I was born in 96. So this car was basically as old as I was. So I was 17 when I bought it. I saved up all my money from working at my job, and I bought it the summer before I went into my senior year of high school. I was so excited driving this car to school every single day. I was one of two seniors that actually had a car. And it was so cool being able to drive all my friends around. We'd get coffee. We did all kinds of stuff. And the really cool part about buying a car and being able to drive it and it's yours is you get that pride, that sense of like accomplishment, the kind of pride that you only get from knowing like you worked really hard to get it. Now, to also paint you a picture about this car is this car had no air conditioning. So it would be summer and I would be sweating like crazy, like profusely sweating. I mean, usually it's in the fall where it's like transitioning from like summer to fall and it's still really hot. I'd have to wear layers. So by the time I got out of school, I could make sure I could take my coat off and it's like I was wearing a tank top because it would be so hot in my car. And the same thing in the summer. That was like one of those moments that I would be driving my car and I'd look over and you'd see the really nice cars next to you. I would desperately be thinking, I wish I had air conditioning. Now, what was also funny about this car is anytime I got over 60 miles per hour, the car would rattle. So my hands would be on the steering wheel and they'd just be shaking because the car was moving over 60 miles per hour, which I drove on the highway a lot. So that meant I was always driving over 60 miles per hour. And really this car, it was an older car. So like it had wear and tear on it. And I also would say this car functioned, or should I say it ran on love. I would talk to my car. Like I said, her name was Betsy. So I'd be like, come on, Betsy, you got this. I would drive, I'm from Connecticut. I'd drive all around Connecticut. And every time I'd get to a really steep hill, I would be just saying, come on, Betsy, you could do it. I would do running starts, trying to get my car up these hills. And I would slowly see the mile per hour gauge slowly falling because it was like, it took everything in my car to make it to the top. And these weren't even like wicked steep hills. These were just like normal hills. And those were like the slow starting signs of when I would be sitting in my car and I'd be thinking like, okay, like I feel a little insecure about this. And so that was just being at 17. And I had that car from 17 to 22. So it was more around by the time I got to like 19 to 20, I started to be really insecure about this car. And it wasn't, and I didn't really have all the pride of, oh yeah, I bought it and I earned it anymore. It was really more the like, oh my God, I think I'm a little like borderline embarrassed. I mean, I was when the car would stall out on a busy road. So that was a real instance. I was driving on one of the very busy roads in Connecticut, and all of a sudden I'm like, there's something wrong with my car. Like I could just tell there was something wrong. And at this point in time, me and Betsy, we were connected. We knew what was going on. And all of a sudden I'm driving and I'm in the right lane and I'm turning right, and all of a sudden I get onto this other lane. I'm right in front of a Chili's. My car stalls. And I'm like freaking out as about like 21, 22. I had never had my car just stop like that. I'm like furiously trying to turn the key, get it to turn on. Somehow it turns on again. And it's like I'm crawling to get into this Chili's parking lot. And the funniest thing is the Chili's parking lot is on an incline. So I can't even get my car to go up the incline. Finally, after like pep talking Betsy, I mean, I was truly pep talking this car. It makes it into the Chili's parking lot. And then as soon as I get into a spot, like stalls, turns off, won't turn on again. I had to like call my dad and be like, please come and help me. And the funniest thing is, I had issues like that with this car often. It didn't stall like that, but there was times where things would just fly off this car. I'd be on busy highways. I'd pull off to the side. My dad would have to come rescue me like a half hour away from my house. There'd be times where I'd be at school and the car didn't even turn on. I needed people to help me jump start my car. All of these moments really refined my character because the moment I got a new car, or it was a new car for me, it wasn't a brand new car, there was a level of gratitude I would have never had if I hadn't gone through all of those crazy times with my 97 Honda Accord, or lovingly referred to as Betsy. If I didn't have Betsy and I didn't go through those things, I wouldn't have had any appreciation for my new car. And so what's also really funny is another great story that comes to mind is when I was 17 and I was finally able to drive other people. I remember me and my cousins, we decided we were going to go Black Friday shopping. So I pick them up, we're driving, we go to all these different malls. It's by the end of the day and I'm about to drop my cousins off and I'm driving, and all of a sudden one of my cousins, she's sitting in the front seat, looks over at me and sees my hands are shaking because I'm on the highway and I'm going over 60 miles per hour. And she goes, Christina, why are your hands shaking? And all of a sudden my cousin in the back goes, she's going over 60 miles per hour. Her hands shake. You're just noticing this? And then she laughs and she goes, yeah, I didn't notice. And we all just erupted in laughter. And the funniest thing is my sister actually had like one of those really nice luxury cars where it had like vibrating seats and different things like that. And I used to joke that I'm like, not only does my car vibrate, but I also have a sauna because I have no air conditioning. So luxury or poor, we don't really know. But that's the thing where I look at those moments, and at 17, at 19, at 20, when I would have desperately loved to have a new car and not to have to go through every time pulling into my work parking lot and seeing people with really nice cars and just thinking like, man, this is rough. I feel really insecure, like all these different things. I wouldn't trade that for anything because it really refined who I am and what my character is. That at the end of the day, my car doesn't define who I am. And that's something that, once again, until you go through those moments, you don't have the context for those things. And so that also leads me to my next story. I was 22 at the time, and I had just become a supervisor within the retail store that I was working at. And so, just to provide some quick context, this retail store I was working at, they had slowly eliminated the assistant store manager position in a majority of their stores. And so their solution was they were going to replace assistant store managers with supervisors. So we still had a store manager. They just didn't have an assistant store manager. And so in our store, we could only have like 2 supervisors within the building because we were considered a smaller store. Once I had gotten promoted to being a supervisor, we had 3 supervisors in this store. And so what happens is when you have 3 supervisors, one of the supervisors has to get moved. And so my store manager had been training me and mentoring me to be a supervisor since the time I had really started working there. And I was about 20 when I had started working there. And so the solution was they had to transfer a different supervisor out of the store. So when the news broke that I was becoming a supervisor and I was going to be staying in the store and a different supervisor was getting moved to a whole new store in a different town/city, a lot of people became very frustrated with this. And apparently the whole store ended up hating me because of this. And what was funny is as this transition was happening, a lot of people in management had kind of given me some warning and just being aware that they said, you're going to become a supervisor, you're staying in the store that you started in. And a lot of times that can ruffle some people's feathers. So just, be aware of that. And if you need any help, just let us know. And so becoming a supervisor, I had started to notice things were changing a little bit. And a lot of it in my mind felt like it was in my head, like, oh, is someone like not talking to me? Or like, it was just normal things where you're kind of like gaslighting yourself, where you're thinking, I think I'm making this up. Like, no, like, I don't want to be sensitive. Like, I think I'm making this up. Like, so-and-so is not really not listening to me. Like, I'm sure it's me is kind of the moral of the point. And as time was going on, like all of a sudden, like I think by the end of like a week, I had gotten pulled to the side by one of the full-timers. I was not technically, I was her boss. I was a supervisor, so I outranked her, but she was one of the full-timers that worked there. She pulled me to the side and just was very bluntly saying the whole store hates you, and myself included. And I was flabbergasted. I mean, this woman was significantly older than me. She was, in my opinion, what I would consider a true adult, because I felt like a baby adult, but she was someone that she was a real adult. She was significantly older than me. And the moment she looks at me and she just said, yeah, the whole store hates you and I do too. I couldn't believe it, because the supervisor that had gotten booted was someone she was really close to. So it's funny, I look back at that time in my life, and that whole instance lasted well over a month. It was like a month to 2 months where, in honesty, the whole store really didn't like me. But it was one of those moments. The shocking part of the whole thing is I would have expected the people closer in my age to be the meanest or nastiest versions of whatever was happening in that store. But the funny thing was, the people closest to my age were actually nice, like the nicest. There would be like little moments where maybe they weren't necessarily having small talk with me. They were frustrated, understandable, change happens. It makes people upset. But the thing that was really interesting was to watch how these full-timers who were either double my age or significantly older than me, people that you would expect to be real adults, they were really nasty. They were the ones that would say like the whole store hates you. I got doors slammed in my face. I had people screaming at me from across the store. And the thing that's unique in this moment, and like I said, I was 22 at the time. So when I think about being 22 now, and I'm like, you're learning to have boundaries and learning, and the things that I would expect and the things I'd put up with at 22, it's your first experience. So in a lot of ways, it's very shocking. It's jarring. The first time I ever had someone talk back to me, I was like flabbergasted. And I had talked to someone else in management when that happened. And I just said, I was 22. I said, if I was the 40-year-old guy manager or store manager, they would have never said that to me. It was because I was 22 and a woman that they just thought it was okay. And of course, the guy that had said that heard me say that, which I guess made him more mad, and decided that he wasn't going to listen to me the rest of the day. And so I had to throw him out of the store. And that was something at 22 I never thought I would have to do, was kick someone out that was significantly older than me because they couldn't listen to me. But those were moments where, once again, this refinement of character. There's going to be times in your life where people don't like you. There's nothing you can do about it. There's nothing that you can fix about it. And it's not about having sympathy and saying, oh, poor you. It's one of those things, the more that you're able to be aware, there's going to be times where it's like people aren't going to like you and you're going to ruffle feathers. It's just part of life. And the beautiful thing about it is when you go through those refinement of character moments, when you get older, not that it bothers you less, but it just doesn't surprise you because you faced it once before. So, and the other thing that's also really interesting about all these moments is when you have the opportunity to mentor people, it's like you can prepare people for how these things are going to look moving forward. And so to say at 28, when I look back at those moments, that was a really hard 2 months. And I thought it was never going to end. And then one day, honestly, everything kind of like slowly settled. People weren't angry. They started to handle things better and just all these different things. But it took time. It took time to settle. It took time for people to see that who I was going to just stay true to who I was going to be. And so those moments really changed and shaped my life. And I would say that moment of being a supervisor, being 22, and just seeing the people that you would expect more from, maybe people that have lived more life than you, and you just assume they'd have character and just all these different things. And it shockingly surprises you that they don't, or their bar isn't the same caliber. And so all of a sudden you start to realize that it's kind of like, ooh, the world can be this cruel place at times. But what's so interesting, and it's funny because my mom would always say, is you can't control other people, but you can control yourself. And so a lot of times, like if I came home and I'd talk to my mom and I'd say like, it was a really hard day. And she'd just be like, just keep being you. And it was one of those things of don't sink to other people's level. You don't have to like prove yourself to them. It's not about them. And that's the thing. And a lot of times is if you can stay the course, and it's not easy. I'm going to tell you that right now. It's not easy. It's not easy to rise above. It's not easy to be gracious. It's more difficult than it is to sink to someone else's level. But there's also something really beautiful about holding your own and being consistent. And that's the really unique thing about the refinement of character. Now, what's really cool is I also look at character a completely different way. So character to me, I always think of it as like jewels. And so a lot of times with jewels, you could think of like a ruby or a sapphire, an emerald, but my favorite is a diamond. And so with diamonds, and of course, I always think of that phrase, diamonds are a girl's best friend. And so when you think about diamonds, I remember learning this fact when I was in school, and it was one of my favorite facts about diamonds, and it's something I tell people all the time. And so this fact about diamonds is about how diamonds are formed. So diamonds are formed deep within the Earth's mantle, about 100 miles or more below the surface, and they're formed under extreme heat and pressure. So just get that visual in your head. They're submerged so deep in the earth. And then what's so interesting is in order for them to be created, they need a lot of heat and a lot of pressure. So that's like a high intensity process they have to go through. But what's so unique is when they come out, they're this very beautiful, valued thing. And so what's also so interesting is I remember I was watching this show called White Collar. And for anyone that's never seen White Collar, I highly recommend. It's a show about this criminal. And what happens is he teams up with an FBI agent and he helps this FBI agent track down other criminals. In one episode in particular, they are tracking down like a jewel thief. And so what they have to do is actually forge a fake diamond so they can replace it with the real diamond. And so the criminal has a friend who's a forger. He creates a diamond, and just as he's about to hand over this fake diamond to the FBI agent is looking at it and he goes, "This is perfect," because he created it. It's perfect. But what the forger does is before he hands it over, holds the diamond in his hand and he gets a hammer. And he basically takes the hammer to the diamond and hits it. Now, he doesn't hit it to crack it in half. He hits it to create a flaw within the diamond. And the FBI agent instantly reacts and is like, "What are you doing?" And the forger goes, "Now it's perfect. Now it has a flaw." Because what this forger knew and what he said to the FBI agent is he goes, "Every great diamond has a flaw." So now, whenever I talk to people and they're going through hard things in life and it's unrelenting, and you can think about that heat, that pressure, and maybe there's these insecurities that really bother you, but maybe you're going through your diamond process, because in order to become a diamond, you go through an immense amount of heat and pressure, but every diamond has a flaw. So if I was going to sum this episode up into one phrase, I would say, what breaks us makes us. And I want to say that one more time. What breaks us makes us, because every diamond has a flaw. Every diamond is submerged in this immense amount of heat and pressure. And even when it comes out, and even when it becomes this beautiful symbol, which is a diamond, it still has a flaw. So I want you to think, what breaks us makes us. just like those character building moments, the moments of the first time you enter a managerial position and you find out someone doesn't like you. What breaks us makes us. And it's those flaws that we have that actually can draw people to you. You know, we think our flaws are our weaknesses or the insecurities of our lives, when really it's the part of ourselves that make us unique. And those are the things that we will later be identified as part of our life. It's the signifier of our uniqueness. The quote that I wanted to talk about today, it's by John Wooden. And the quote goes, "Ability may get you to the top, but it takes character to keep you there." And that's the most important part about today's topic, is when we think about manners and we think about character and when we think about diamonds and when we think about what breaks us, makes us, it's the character that we have that can never be taken from us. So even if the whole store hates you, even if you didn't land the job that you wanted or things aren't going the way that you wanted, no one can take away what's on. No one can take away what's on the inside. If that didn't sound like a line from a Disney movie, I don't know what does. But that is the most important thing I just want you to remember today. So the key takeaways. So 1, character refinement is for you, the individual. 2, what breaks us makes us. 3, character and manners are not the same. Manners is how you act in front of others, and character is how you act regardless of if others are watching. And 4, it's the quote of this week's episode. Ability may get you to the top, but it takes character to keep you there. John Wooden. So those were our key takeaways from this week's episode. And like I said, if there's anything I want you to remember from this week's episode, I want you to think, what breaks us makes us. So thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. It's been a blast to connect with you, and I'd love to connect with you in other ways. And you can find us on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube at Let's Unravel Pod. If you enjoyed this week's episode, I encourage you to give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, you name it. I'd love to hear more from you in the comments below. And like always, it's been a pleasure to talk to you and looking forward to talking to you again next week. We have new episodes every Thursday. See you soon. Bye.